Thank you so much, Mr. President. And I very much appreciate what's been said on this floor. I appreciate the opportunity to compromise, and I don't mean to ruin the kumbaya moment that we're having, but I wanted an opportunity to explain why I'm actually going to be voting no on this legislation. I believe in accountability. I voted on a bill that was not decrim coming out of committee. I believe that when someone commits a crime, they should be held accountable for that crime. But I also know what addiction looks like, Mr. President. And I also know that while this is a far stretch from some of the policies that came through on the war on drugs, what the war on drugs did do was it imposed additional penalties, including jail and prison time, on populations that are now reflected disproportionately in our systems. That's what it did. It didn't help people heal. It didn't help them get better, because that's not what those institutions are designed to do. And if you've ever known somebody that is suffering from drug addiction, Mr. President, that's not, when they are in the throes of their addiction, that is not who they are. It controls and consumes them in a way that if simply putting them in jail for an arbitrary amount of time was going to resolve that, if knowing that criminal penalties were being offered wasn't a deterrent then, it's not going to be a deterrent now, and people are going to come out sick and sicker. And what we do know, and what the data does show, is that when people are released is when they are more susceptible to overdose and death. And for me, that is a bridge too far. I cannot vote for something that sounds good. It sounds great to say, great, if they don't go to treatment, send them to jail. But it hasn't been ever proven to work. And I've watched people in my life suffer through an addiction that consumes their personality, that makes them make choices that they would never make if they were clean and sober. And I've watched some of them spend time in jail and prison systems, and it didn't make them better. I am always going to say accountability is key. People have heard me say, let's collect data, let's look at data, let's examine the facts on the ground, and let's make an informed decision. I do not believe that's what we're doing today, and I believe there are deep issues with what we're passing off the floor. And I appreciate the work of the prime sponsor. My goodness, I mean, this is, I will say it's doing the Lord's work to take this issue on. And I thank her deeply, and I thank everybody who's engaged. But there is a difference between doing good and sounding good. And I don't believe that this is the good that we think it is. And that is why I'm going to vote no on this bill. And I just want to thank everything that's been said and everybody for their work on it, but I just wanted to stand up and say my piece, and I thank you, Mr. President.
Further remarks, Senator Trudeau.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've mentioned before on this floor how much I believe in policy rooted in data and facts. I've also shared a lot of personal stories that reflect how much I also believe in love, hope, family, and humanity. In my humble opinion, I think that we do need to be emotionally responsive to issues, but we also need to be honest with ourselves when we're letting emotions overlook the issues on the ground, the facts on the ground. Some of the examples and the stories that were provided here today are absolutely heartbreaking, but many of them, when you dig a little bit deeper, don't actually line up with the policy recommendations that have been used to support some of the amendments or support for the underlying bill. If I may, Mr. President, I'd like to offer a little bit of data from my own county.
Please proceed.
Thank you. I live in the city of Tacoma. City of Tacoma has had a restrictive pursuit policy similar to what we have passed in state law well before state law changed. The city of Fife has banned pursuits. Let me tell you about the city of Lakewood. And I don't mean to pick on the city of Lakewood, but I think it's a good example. There was the Pierce County Council requested an audit, Mr. President, and that's the data that I'm offering today. Before the law changed, there were 66 pursuits tracked with a 35% arrest rate, 38% accident rate, and 9% injury rate. After we passed the law, the pursuits actually increased, 306 pursuits, Mr. President. 9.8 resulted in arrest, 10% accident rate, so 38% to 10% in the accident rate, pre and post the law change, 9% to 3% from before and after the law changed. These are percentages, Mr. President, but these are people impacted. This is property damage. This is individuals that are impacted, innocent bystanders. And so when you see where the accidents and the injury rates don't line up with the purpose of why we've allowed pursuits, I think we really have to have an honest conversation with ourselves. And I want to also say, I am so sorry for every victim of crime. I am so sorry. And I think I speak for every member on this body. Nobody wants that. I myself, Mr. President, come from a family of crime victims. I'm a mother, and I have 2 small children. A block away from my home last summer, I watched a fatal accident occur because people were speeding in our neighborhood, an urban neighborhood. I was taking a video, actually, of my son while the accident happened. That's because we don't have all of the infrastructure necessary. We don't have stop signs. I'm petitioning the city for that. But it creates a dangerous situation. And to say that we don't care about what happens if a vehicle is stolen and somebody is harmed by that, that is disingenuous. Absolutely we care. This policy has weighed heavy, heavy on my heart since we first were discussing it in committee. But I think there's many victims that we're ignoring in the conversation, those percentage points, those individuals. I know that any victim of crime, me included, does not want another victim of crime in the process of seeking justice. I don't want that. I would like to be the only person victimized. I don't want to have somebody else in that club with me. So this is really hard, but I ask, why are we presented with a false choice over and over again about which victims are more important to elevate? Absolutely not. We have addressed a number of policies in the Law and Justice Committee that address things like catalytic converter theft, auto theft, all of the range of issues that we're talking about today. There are a number of ways that we can get at this issue. But I ask why we don't cry for all the victims. I do. There is a particular person that has been responding incessantly on all of the different, social media accounts that have gone on to spread misinformation and disinformation about this policy. And she's like, what about my family? What about my child that was killed in a pursuit? What about me? Nobody comments, nobody likes her remarks, and yet she continues to do it. And I follow her, and I reached out to her, and I said, I care. We had a member of this body last year that talked about how he had a family member close to him that was an innocent bystander, struck in a pursuit. I think he cares very deeply about that family member, Mr. President. We talk about business and property crimes. I have family who own a business in downtown Tacoma. And my cousin asks, what about the data related to the damage that high-speed chases cause to businesses and to properties? Who pays for that? And I wanted to offer, Mr. President, I supported a bill out of Law and Justice because I believe that when you flee, you should be apprehended, point blank. But we know that there is technology, and there's technology in the bill that I voted for, that would allow us to do that, and shows that it works in Redmond, in Spokane, and other areas that have restricted pursuit policies. There is technology that allows us to find and apprehend individuals without harming the public. Why are we not having that conversation? That keeps law enforcement safe, that keeps individuals safe, bystanders safe, and it still actually results in a higher rate of apprehension of individuals. And in fact, if used well, it can actually lead to apprehending more individuals involved in criminal activity. And that's been a unifying conversation. I've talked to people who are more conservative in my district, and because of what they've heard, frankly, from I'll just say it, at Pierce County Sheriff's Facebook page, they were confused about the pursuit policy in our town. And I said, we've always had a restrictive pursuit policy. Let me tell you what I supported. And they said, great, yeah, absolutely. Put a location dart on that car and find that vehicle. We agree. So I just want to offer that there are effective tools, and we should be looking at them. We have the technology, we have the ability to do that, but we should not present a false choice between victims. Who is more deserving? All victims should be considered, and that's why I support technology to do this. And I believe that this body is going to move forward with some of that technology to provide that resource. And I'm happy because I think that bill pushed that conversation. But to me, I have to vote no on this bill because this is a false choice to me. We can do better. We have the ability to do better. And as a person who's been a victim of crime, I stand with all victims, and I don't want any more, not one more. Thank you, Mr. President.